No, John Barker weird biscuits in this. What's he called?
There's a masala hummus.
Do you want to just stick that in the middle of the table? You could put some normal biscuits from the biscuit tin, like shortbreads and hummus.
So welcome back to the Evo podcast. This is episode 15. I'm reliably informed. I'd like to welcome John, James and Dickie back to the table. That's what you've been up to since we last spoke, which was Pagani's last time. What have you been up to, John, since then? I think you've been driving with Italy again.
Yeah, actually, it was Portugal. I noticed it was actually labelled wrong on the the little thumbnail thing. In that it was actually Portugal, and it was the Ferrari 12-cylinder Spider, so the drop-top version, which had the opportunity to deliver more of that lovely V12 noise.
Did it?
No.
Oh.
It had the opportunity, but it missed it.
It didn't actually improve on that. Great car, really demanding place to go, partly because the roads aren't great. It was sort of down near Lisbon, and partly because there was a storm coming in, so it's going to lash us with rain for the most of the day. But
perfect convertible.
Perfect convertible weather. Yeah, indeed.
Is it waterproof?
It is. Aston, being Aston, had his marked maps with him and said we should go here rather than where the Ferrari personnel were recommending we should go. So we headed sort of inland and south, and it all dried up at lunchtime. So we were playing around in the rain, and then it dried up. So we got a full suite of conditions to dry the car, and then it was in the wet it was very good, and in the dry it was just phenomenal. I mean, you've driven the
I really liked it.
Yeah, I've not driven it yet.
It's really, to go from wet to dry, it's going to be more impressive because the grip's all working. But wowee, it's agile but very secure.
Really wieldy, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because it doesn't look it, does it? Styling doesn't suggest it's going to be
it looks more
car
like
that you're going to sling around. Yeah, it looks big car.
Big
and grippy, but
it's super wieldy.
All the press cars, obviously they didn't know there was going to be a dark, nasty thunderstorm, but they were all dark green, probably darker than your jacket, metallic.
So designed for motion journeys, sort of green and tan.
Yeah, so all the other magazines, I think, pretty much went with the route and came back distraught, having got no photos, or not really very good photos, and no lunch. And Aston and I had a nice lunch by the seaside. Came back with the goods.
How smug were you on a scale?
Oh, very smug. Yeah. It was a good moment. So yeah, great car. The thing is, it's such a quick car, isn't it? And 3 gears, 4 gears in, you are really travelling. But you don't get to do that very often in the UK. So you need something to entertain you when you're just sort of stroking the car around, and that's where it falls down. One of the few places it falls down.
And you've driven the Vanquish. How does it compare?
The Vanquish, I don't know how they do it. It's got turbos on, which everybody says that sucks all of the intake noise from the car, but it sounds like it's running on open trumpets. It sounds phenomenal. Yeah. It's a great engine, and quite a similar performance in a different way, but it just has that character when you're not on it. It's still entertaining just through the sound quality. So yeah, good job Aston. Ferrari, well, tuners are going to sell quite a few.
Yeah, Novatec are kind of rubbing their hands together, I think. But.
Is there anything? Do you think there's anything they can do before they're already arriving with customers now? It's all emissions based, isn't it, and all legislation based?
Yeah, it seems that they've really, they've hit all their targets, which allows them to keep producing a naturally aspirated 6.5 litre 800 plus horsepower
which is
V12,
amazing in itself,
which is amazing, and we're very grateful. Well, they announced the Spider and Coupe at the same time, so they pretty much run in parallel, so there was nothing they could do before the launch of the Spider.
Do you think they've used up, because the noise pot includes tyre noise, doesn't it? So do you think they've given it more?
I'm not sure.
Like noisier tyres are generally grippier tyres, so do you think they've used up a bit more there, so they've had to knock back the exhaust noise, or because they're all playing by the same legislative rules, aren't they?
So I don't know, and they have got this, I think at JLR they call it a symposer, but basically it's something that transmits intake pulses and noise into the cabin. So they're doing the stuff that they like to do and to shout about, but it doesn't.
Well, they did a lot of work with that SF90XX, didn't they? Ferrari, and plumbed a load of hot and cold noises, they said, didn't they, from intake and exhaust side of the engine, and managed to make that much more
for a V8
of an organic kind of nice exciting noise. It's more of an event, but
I'm not sure whether they think it doesn't need it because it's a GT and it's meant to be more refined. But I think it is a missed opportunity.
So I haven't been disappointed with the sound of your Ferrari, Mr. 800 horsepower and naturally aspirated V12, but it doesn't sound good enough. We then sent you packing somewhere a bit colder as penance.
Yeah, not necessarily for Evo, but I do Evo and Auto Express tyre tests. So this time of year we're doing the tyre test that comes out in autumn, late autumn, which is winter tyres and all-season tyres. So I was in Finland, northern Finland, inside the Arctic Circle for a week.
Eating bears from the pictures of the menu, you said. Bears and reindeer.
I've never seen that before. Reindeer, yes, but smoky reindeer. But bear meat. Very strange. You've got to try everything once, haven't you? But yeah, so we had...
Was it a bit grizzly?
But dumb.
Sorry.
So yeah, we takes a long while to get. There's 2 planes to get to Ivalo and that area up in northern Finland. So we travelled on the Monday. We were coming back on the Saturday, and the temperatures just weren't cold enough. It was chilly in the night, but it hadn't actually got into the ground, and it wouldn't keep the surfaces of the test tracks cold enough to be consistent to run all your tyres.
So just slush up, I suppose, or dust, snow, ice, dust and stuff.
And you'd dig grooves into it as well. So we trusted the guys at Goodyear who were hosting us to tell us when we could get out on track. And we had to be at the airport at 4 o'clock on Saturday afternoon, and we started testing at 7 a.m. that morning.
Bloody hell.
That was the first time it had been cold enough to be consistent. So yeah, 24 sets of tyres in a few hours. Having been there all week waiting for the temperatures to go down.
Bloody hell. And what facility is it up there? Is it part of the OEM sort of testing area, or is it just for Goodyear, something that they own and their whole facility?
Well, Goodyear rent it from a chap called Tommy Mackinnon. Might have heard of him.
Rings a bell.
Yeah. It's next to a town. It's a lovely town called Saraselka, and it's literally just over the other side of the road from the border of the town. And I think it's called Adventureland or something. So there's an ice race, kart racing circuit, and there's these various other circuits. But Goodyear have a deal to exclusively use it for their tyre testing. But it's been a very frustrating year for all of the tyre makers. Chatting to one of our My Life in Cars subjects, Geared, he was out with Radistine, and he just messaged today say they've lost 80% of their snow testing time.
Wow.
So it's, and it does have a knock on. You can go to New Zealand.
Lovely place.
There's an indoor track as well, isn't there? Winter testing indoor
track. Is that Hankook have got an indoor track?
I think it's at UTAC. That's one of the joint or an independent test facility. We wrote something about it a couple of years ago. And that's good, but the consequences of going slightly offline when you're out in the snow is the snowbanks grab you, drag you in.
This must be like a street circuit then, is it? Like
very
tyre testing around Monaco or something?
Yeah.
Like an indoor karting track or something.
Yeah, so there are risks with that. And people tell me that the snow in New Zealand is different as well. So you really are, if you can't get your testing done, it does knock the projects back a little bit.
So what are they going to do if they've lost 80% of their winter tyre testing time? Will they have to throw money at it and go down to the Southern Hemisphere? This are some of their winter?
I guess there's a bit of that, and there is these year-round indoor facilities as well. It's not just... There is one circuit, but there is also, I think there's one that's almost half a kilometre long, snow lane and an ice lane. So all indoors.
For braking and
acceleration, which is, is almost more important than the cornering stuff.
Well, on the positive side, if it gets any warmer, they won't need to do snow tyres anyway, will
that's
they?
one way to look at it, Rich. Yeah. Always find something positive.
Yes, so that was quite a frustrating week. Great for the photographer, got days and days of time to take shots, and then just one sort of morning, one extended morning to get all of the driving done. No, it was good. Yeah, we got it done.
When are you doing the Evo tyre test?
That's early June with Bridgestone this year, so down to Italy. Probably be freezing, won't it?
Yeah, because it's going to be freezing, it's going to rain.
Absolutely.
So, James, what have you been up to since you got back from holiday? I know you've been planning lots of stuff for future issues. This was that weird time when you've been out the loop for a while. What have you been doing?
Yeah, a lot of forward planning stuff. Although one driving thing did do quite recently was, well, with you at the same time, we went and did a bit of driver training with Mr. Paul Ripley.
We did, yes.
Up in Yorkshire. So we took 2 Evo long-term test cars, which familiar from Fast Fleet, the BMW Z4 and the Porsche Boxster, which arrived on the fleet recently. Yeah. And we did a bit of time on the road, some great driving roads on the North York Moors, and a little bit on track as well at a proving ground too.
Yeah, nothing like having your homework marked, is there?
It was
and really being sat in the room as they're marking it, sat next to you.
Did you get the gold stars as well? Dickie and I
They've invented another metal, precious metal for Stu.
I've seen all your driving reports back from Mr. Ripley, yes. I'll talk to you later about those.
But no, it's great. Yeah, I completely forgot how to operate a car as soon as Paul was sat next to me. Tried to drive out of where we set off from.
Yeah, it's like we're just filming you. All you have to do is walk across to the
walk normally.
Just that casually.
Yeah.
No, it's fascinating, wasn't it? Because it was on roads that we use quite a lot, and well, you guys did it as well, and the rest of the team's been through it. But when you're not driving it, you're driving it with someone there who's assessing you, and they're saying, no, just relax, just drive on this road as you would normally.
I think it's good. It makes you sort of focus on your own sort of bad habits or lazy habits. It's nice to reset, isn't it? And think, if you're preoccupied, then you're not going to drive as well. If you're tired, you're not going to. So you just kind of calm yourself down. And
how you can plan around other people as well. You sort of end up driving their cars as well as yours, don't you, when you're looking at what other people are doing.
Yeah, managing the spaces.
Yeah, it's watching other people, isn't it? You think,
I think Paul's a big advocate of that, isn't he?
Yeah.
Not using other people to blame for your own bad road positioning or overspeeding or whatever it is. You should be aware of who's behind you, who's in front of you. It's quite a stimulating. You're much more engaged with your driving, I think, once you've spent some time with him.
Yeah, it definitely makes you
think. So it's not about driving faster, is it? It's just driving better. I think.
You're just noticing sort of. I do a lot of motorway driving, and one thing that Paul kept saying is everyone drives in packs and don't become part of their pack, and if someone wants to be, let's just let them. And you think, well, it's much more relaxed way of driving because you're not constantly getting frustrated by it.
Well, otherwise you get past them and then you catch up with the next ones, or you get tangled up with the next ones. So
it was a good couple of days, wasn't it?
Definitely.
Quite intense as well. I didn't realise until I got home. You're like, oh, blimey,
I was completely exhausted.
You've engaged a lot more, haven't you?
Yeah, definitely. It's the mental effort.
Processing everything. Yeah, it is a good thing to do.
And based out of the Motorist, which I hadn't been to before. You had.
I'd not been there before either. It's a good place.
It's a great facility up that Bannock and his team has put together.
Funny enough, small world, we ran into Simon George and his 300,000 mile
really?
Lamborghini.
Yes. He was parking it inside the Motorist for
broken again. Triggers broom.
That's exactly how he refers to it as when we...
It was fascinating. Driving it in, and he was being positioned. It's not the easiest car to drive slowly through a building, and he got it in position, and someone went, "Oh, we kind of meant for it to be facing the other way."
Oh no!
He
didn't start and try and do a 3-point turn, but
V12 sounded pretty good indoors.
But you should look up Simon George's other passion.
The railway, or model railway.
Britain's biggest model railway.
Yeah, I've not
check that one out, kids.
That's
worth a look.
Murcielago model railway. Perfect.
He's just made scale cooling towers.
Oh, really?
That's the last thing I saw. Very personal to
him and Rod Stewart.
Yeah.
Lamborghinis and model railway. It must be a thing.
Moving on. Dickie, what have you been up to? I hear, rumour tells me.
I did drive a certain black 911 RS for a short journey to make sure it still worked, which is...
You remember where you parked it?
Yeah, it was still in the garage. No one had stolen it, so that was nice. It's always nice to drive that car. Every year I think, I really should drive this more, just as I'm parking it back in the garage. But
is it MOT exempt now?
No, it's not that old, sadly. So that
Dickie is, but the car isn't.
No, it needs a service. My wife's car had a service. My Fiesta needs a service, and the Porsche needs a service all at the same time. So that's not good planning. But no, the Porsche is really good. And compared to other cars I've owned, they're the only ones that, touch wood, they never seem to have any issues. Like, you just keep the battery charged, start them up, and they're sweet as a nut. Most things seem to find ways of going wrong while you're not using them. So it's a great car for that.
So can we expect to see it out this year?
Yes, I might even bring it to one of our Goodwood track days, actually.
Which will be announced by the time this comes out. You'll be able to book your space.
Yeah, that'd be good. I'll definitely do that.
Yeah, that'd be good to see it.
What else have I driven? Well, we had our new Dacia Duster long term arrive. So it's an Evo weird crush, isn't it? The Dacia Duster, a bit like Skoda Yeti. They're just a little chunky, little fun, simple car.
So is that with you now? Is that
it is. It's outside. Yes, it's a 1500 petrol, so 3-cylinder petrol with a little hybrid assist. So it's quite a different thing to the previous one. There's some similarities in the way it drives, but yeah, it's cool. It's a good reset. So
well, they are, aren't they? They are that sort of reset car, aren't they? You sort of.
I think they're like they're a perfect kind of does it all family car that's interesting and not Volkswagen Group, or it's characterful the way it looks, and it's characterful the way it drives, and it functions really well. And it's still 25,000 quid seems like a lot of money to me, but for a brand new 5-seater family car with a big boot, really good value still, I think, even though they've crept up compared to the earlier versions. But
as you say, compared to whatever.
Well, 40 grand for something more conventional and probably not as much fun.
Yeah, exactly. Or as we're about to talk about, £60,000 for a hatchback.
Exactly.
We touched on it a couple of weeks ago because you guys had just come back from our hyper hatch test.
Yes.
And you were talking about the drive back in A45, John, and you were in the Yaris, weren't you, Dickie?
Yeah.
What were you actually doing up there? Because I don't think we went into much detail about what the test was and what we were trying to.
I think we were. I know we're sort of quite conscious sometimes that we tend to feature very high value, exotic metal, don't we? So we've had Paganis, we've had the McLarens in a previous issue. So we wanted to kind of celebrate something that's a little bit more attainable. Hot hatches have always been close to our heart, and it just so happens that there's 3 all-wheel drive hot hatches that are kind of hyper hatches with different all-wheel drive systems, and one's got a 3-cylinder turbo, one's got a 4-cylinder turbo, one has a 5-cylinder turbo. So it's just quite an interesting comparison, I think. So we spent a day in Wales on the road on some of our favourite loops, and then we spent a day on track just to explore some of the different dynamic modes and all-wheel drive settings, to explore the areas of performance you can't really get into on the road. So that was it was a really nice few days, and 3 really interesting cars.
Updated RS3, Gen 2 GR Yaris, and A45 S.
Automatic Yaris as well, which is quite interesting.
Yeah, it was the first time we've driven that.
On the road, yeah.
What do you think of that with the auto box? It was interesting reading the review and watching the film of Yusuf and yourself on the film. Was sort of, yes, it's a good box, but sometimes you miss the manual, and sometimes the auto box works really well.
I think the manual can sometimes be not quite as slick as you'd like it, and the auto's not quite as sharp as you'd like it all the time. It's that classic kind of you gain with one of them and lose, you lose and gain in different areas. But I did have to say I was quite lukewarm about the gearbox when I first drove it, but then by the time I got back home after the 3 days, I'd got much more used to it and understood that actually the harder you drive it, the sharper the shift seems to get. And I can see the appeal of it. It does change. Yusuf, rightly said, it changes the character of the car and seems to make it a slightly different proposition to people. So I think it's got broader appeal than a manual.
What are those changes, would you say, for the manual and the auto Yaris? Is it a big character change, or was it just broader?
I think you drive it differently. I think you always drive a paddle shift car differently to a manual, because you can compress all the braking gear shifts into a smaller space of time. So you tend to dive bomb the corners a little bit more and drive it, in essence, like you would a Ferrari or a PDK 911 or something. So you don't have to kind of plan your approach and then choose your gear, and so you don't have to change that halfway through the corner, or all those kind of old-fashioned driving skills. So I think it potentially makes it more exciting, and you can drive it harder, more easily when you're really going for it. But I think you're not as engaged with it all of the time, because you can just switch off and it'll change gear itself. So I don't know what I would choose, actually.
The RS3 seemed to sort of impress you more than you thought?
Of the 3 cars, I think I'd find it hard to resist the RS3, just because it's exciting, and it's a little bit of a hot rod, because the engine dominates the car more than the other 2, and it's got more character. It's sort of a richer, slightly more exotic feel to the car because of that engine, and it's this weird mix of front like quite hardcore front wheel drive handling and some rear wheel drive handling as well. So I quite like the way you sort of fight it a little bit on the road. I don't think I'd need to drive it as hard, certainly as the Mercedes. I think that was the one that left me most lukewarm, I think.
Yeah.
Even though at certain moments and in certain situations it's really, really good. But as a whole, I didn't really bond with it as much as I thought I would.
And with the Yaris, you're not sure which... It sounds like it's a car that you'd want both, depending on what road you turn up on, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't think you're not gonna make a wrong decision with either. Really, I suppose it depends. If it's your daily, like a lot of people seem to use them as a daily alternative to their supercar or something, then probably the autos are better. Covers all the bases better. But I was pleased that I got to enjoy it more, because at first I was like, I'm not sure about this. It seems a bit of an odd. It'd be like having a automatic Impreza turbo or something. It's sort of just doesn't seem right instinctively, but
because you can, there's a manual version, whereas I suppose with the Mercedes and the Audi you've never had,
and they're more sort of techie cars and feel, aren't they? So it's sort of
that's a good point actually. The Yaris does seem quite simple in a lot of respects, more straightforward, so you don't necessarily expect to have that, as a whole experience. It's a really nice thing, really desirable, and lots of old school character in it, I think, and just the way it works with the road was really entertaining.
Talking of the tech, there is a lot of tech in those cars, and you did a bit looking into the four-wheel drive systems and the powertrains. They're not a traditional, like the old days. A hot hatch was just with the wick turned up and some lowering springs.
Yeah, we're probably going to talk about some of the wilder, earlier hot hatches, which were mostly trying to get it all down through the front wheels, weren't they? But these, they get the option of shuffling the torque rearwards. And the reason we went to the track is because they can shuffle so much rearwards, you can get drift modes. And so it's quite fun to explore those. The traditional way of doing it with what starts as a front-wheel drive car has been a Haldex. That's just, it's like a clutch halfway down a drive shaft to the rear. And these, the Merc and the Audi, they've moved to this new system which is actually much better. There's no rear diff, and the drive is just managed by clutches on each half shaft. So it means 100% of what goes to the rear can go to one rear wheel, and that's what gives you, it's proper torque vectoring. So that gives you options to really upset the car and get it sliding and drifting.
It feels surprisingly natural, doesn't it, actually, given what's like a wholly unnatural process is going on underneath the car. Once you learn how to provoke it, in fact, you don't really need to provoke the Audi quite as much, certainly as the Mercedes.
I found them quite different. Watching you do it in the Audi, it seemed to do it quite late on in the corner.
Yeah.
It's almost as if the torque was gradually being ramped up. Do you want it? Yeah, I want it at the back, and then it would ramp up, and then it would
I think
slide.
that's why it felt more like a rear-wheel drive car than having to give it a proper bung. Although I think you could do that as well. But yeah, you didn't feel the need to, because it had this natural kind of sweep it's got a really nice torquey engine as well, so you can kind of take a higher gear and just allow it to do that, which is really satisfying.
And the Merc would go sooner, and then it seemed to run out of rear torque, because there's some really odd pictures. And it reminds me of when we did pictures of the self-levelling Mercs when they came out a few years ago. You do a cornering shot and he's actually leaning into the apex, and it feels as weird as it looks. And with the Merc, you get it pitched in, and it would go quite early and quite nicely, and wave to the camera, and then you get on the exit and suddenly all the torque's at the front.
It just tries to straighten itself out, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It doesn't seem as comfortable doing it feels inherently front driven, doesn't it? I think it has this moment where it thinks it's rear wheel drive, and then it's better straighten everything up, which is quite frustrating.
And I think that Merc, I don't know, they seem to change every generation. They change a few things, and that one seems not as satisfying, certainly in terms of ride. And
it was really quite crashy, wasn't it, on the road? It felt very wooden.
Yeah.
Feels like they've chased more performance out of it.
I'm not sure what they chased.
As a consequence of
its
ride quality and usability as a hatchback, which you
it just didn't seem to have any feel to me on the road. No. Just either side of the straight ahead, and it's always stayed very flat. So you didn't even have your sort of internal gyro to think, oh, that's okay, how hard you work in the car. So it was very more in your head, really, wasn't it? So it's definitely got the grip, so I'll just turn in. On the track, I enjoyed it much more, because you're immediately working through that point where you need to use the feel.
But I thought the Yaris made them both feel a bit sort of flat-footed.
The ride is really good on that car, isn't it?
It just seemed like a real four-wheel drive car, in that both ends seem to be stuck to the road, which isn't always the case at all.
And the body control as well. It just seems
really
much
supple, isn't it?
Much more in harmony, even though some of those roads are really quite jaggedy, aren't they? And there's you're sort of coming up or you're going down as the road's coming up, and it can get horribly crashy.
I saw an outtake of the video when it was being edited. It's you driving the Merc. It looks like you're inside a cement mixer. You're being so kind of bashed around.
You do get thrown around quite a lot. It never ever seemed to settle on those roads, certainly. I think if you found some really nice, I suppose it's a classic
German car.
And it sounds like a cliche, doesn't it? But their roads are increasingly smooth relative to our horrible, embarrassing state.
Theirs aren't crumbling as much as ours have.
Yeah, you need a rally car, and that's what the GR Yaris is. It really does feel like a rally car, doesn't it, on the road? It's very agile, very short.
I think that's what's great about it, isn't it? If you grew up on Imprezas and things, then there's nothing ever. You almost sort out those sorts of roads, because you could just smash it down those and it never seemed to phase them. And I think the Yaris has definitely got that.
And the Yaris feels more special and bespoke, which we know it is, obviously being the car, how it was conceived and what it's conceived to be. Does that make the Audi and the Mercedes feel more like conventional hatches that have been turned into these hyper hatches?
Yeah, I think it does. Yeah,
I think they can't get away from that core.
I think the Merc's probably truest to that, because although it's the most powerful it's got, and that engine is super impressive actually from a pure performance point of view.
Same power as a 996 turbo had.
Yeah, it's wild. And it really
another four-wheel drive turbo car.
Yeah, it really
just
goes.
A few years ago.
But it's sort of at the top end, and it doesn't sound particularly nice, and it's very synthetic sound as well. But yes, I think it's a more conventional hatchback recipe, isn't it?
And by having that all at the top end, going back to John's point, is that what also makes it less sort of adjustable, because you haven't got the torque that the Audi's got, so you're always.
I think the Audi you can work the car, like load the car at lower revs and a higher gear, so you sort of feel settled and kind of under you a bit more, I think.
But it was a little bit touring car-y as well, though, wasn't it?
It would start to, once you got it working, it would sort of start doing this weird hopping kind of thing, which I quite like, because so many cars don't ever seem to acknowledge how hard they're being worked, even if they're to the limit. You just sort of, they're composed, and then you reach the limit of the tyre, and then it just bleeds away. The Audi's a bit kind of just having a bit of a fight with the road. Never to a point where it's completely unruly, but at least you kind of feel like you're driving it hard, which I enjoyed. And I've said before, that engine is just so good.
It is a wonderful engine, isn't it? And it's going to go. It hasn't got much. That's the last car it's going in.
No, it's a big shame. It's such a cool engine,
and it just makes the car as well, doesn't it? It's
absolutely makes the car.
It makes it feel worth the money, because the Audi and the Merc are both a lot of money, but I think you feel like you get more substance from your spend with the Audi.
It's more charismatic for that engine.
The Mercedes has got lots of spangly interior stuff and stripes, and it's trying really hard.
And it's amazing the specific output of the Mercedes. It's like 2 litres and 415 horsepower, I think.
But it's back to the Ferrari Aston thing, isn't it? You can enjoy the Audi just mooching along in a high gear, because it's got
it's an event. So like, as soon as you start it up, it feels like you're in something special.
Sounds like a Quattro, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's proper noise. But I mean, if you've got any of those three cars, you've got definitely got a special car. It's purely down to your personal taste, I think.
Yeah.
And maybe the German cars certainly have a more premium feel than the Yaris. I think when you get in it, it's very much like the Imprezas and Evos used to be, in that you kind of you overlook the fact that they're
the interior is pretty dismal,
isn't it? A bit higher car like
plastics.
You sort of, the interior is one thing where you'll see where the £20,000 price difference or 15 to 20 grand price difference has been spent, but the driving experience is still
pretty special.
Still pretty special, isn't it?
So no, they were great fun, a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's the hot hatch. We've been talking about it a while between us in the office, haven't we? And at one end you got hyper hatches, Mercedes with A45 also doing A35. You got RS3 and S3 from Audi. Showed what they're doing, but we did 2023 18 car hot hatch test, and you've gone through and done some quite sobering data, haven't you, James? Of if we were to do that test again today, how many cars would be in it
Yeah.
But interesting, there would have been 20 in that test.
That's
in 23,
right.
But the Audis S3 and RS3 were right in the middle of one end in production and the new one launching. So we had 18 cars. Yeah. How many would we have today if we were to redo it?
If we were going to do that test today, we'd have 13 cars in it today. So that's
and that's 2 of those are because the Audis are now available, isn't it? So of those 18,
so
was it 11?
11 of those 18 are either still on sale as they were or have been updated since.
But those ones that are on sale are all the good ones, aren't they? Like the Hyundai N's and all that?
Yeah.
No?
From that test, we've lost the Abarth 500, Suzuki Swift Sport, BMW 128 Ti, Ford Focus ST is about to die very shortly, and both the brilliant Hyundai N cars, the i20N and the i30N, are both gone.
That's such a shame.
Yeah.
But you get Civic Type R still.
You can still get the Civic Type R. You can still get, as we just discussed, A45 and A35 AMGs. Some fairly uninspiring hybrid Stellantis cars, the Peugeot 308 and 208 GTs and the Vauxhall Astra GSE. And then in terms of new, or at least heavily updated hatches since we've done that test, the Minis had a spruce up, so Mini Cooper, Mini JCW.
But that is just a spruce up, isn't it? That's still the old.
It's not a new car
because the electric one's on a separate platform, isn't it?
Yeah, same story for the BMW M135i, which has now dropped the i, just the M135, and they've got rid of the 128s. The Golf's GTI and R have had a little bit of an update, but a pretty small one. There's a newish Seat Leon, or heavily updated Leon, or Cooper Leon, and then the GR Yaris has had an update since then. But yeah, the days of swarms of new hot hatches every year, they're long, long gone, and the average price of that test.
Oh, yeah. Well, see, the thing with the hot hatches going is, okay, there's the electrification to play into it, and there's a price point of what you can charge for a hot hatch that isn't a hyper hatch like an RS3 or a A45. But for manufacturers, these were great profit models because you were based on a very big volume car and you were charging more for it with some upgrades. Now the argument is that no one's buying hot hatches or any hatches at all.
Yeah, well, the base car isn't there in the first place now, is it? It's all Pumas and lumpy crossovers, isn't it? Rather than.
But like Hyundai, all that resource that went into
it's such a shame, isn't it? They got so good at it so quickly, and now it's just.
And then it's gone into an Ioniq 5N you've driven and is a really great car, but it's not something you would consider as a.
Well, that's up to RS5 money, isn't it? Is it similar money?
£60,000.
Yeah, it's more than £60,000.
So would you have one of those over an RS3 or?
I wouldn't. I think it's a really impressive car.
Like ignoring the EV. ICE.
Yeah.
Like if you have to have an EV, you have to have an EV, don't you? But out of preference, I don't think you'd choose the.
If you couldn't have, if you're on that end, very very top end of a company car fleet, which I can't imagine an RS3 is on a company car list anywhere. But if you had to have an electric version, you'd have the Ioniq 5N, but
they're so big as well, aren't they? Whenever you see a photo of it in isolation, that looks good. It's a little bit of kind of integrally-ish.
It's a trick of the light, isn't
it? And then you see one drive past you on the road, and it's massive.
Yeah. It's like a small SUV rather than a big hatch.
It's a trick of scale, isn't it? And I think that's where Volkswagen Group sort of tried to keep the car size down and went up. So all of their sort of mid-range models look like they're like Tall Boy.
Yeah, they're sort of wardrobe size shaped, aren't they now?
Yeah, it's those mainstream hatches disappearing is just the knock-on effect has been huge. We saw it when they stopped all making 3 doors and went to 5 doors for economies. I think Golf, you can still get Golf GTI.
I know most people bought 5-door Golfs and things anyway, didn't they? It was only us for group tests and
long-termers
that would have 3 doors really.
And you've got added to that now. I suppose you've got the first. There's a JCW Mini electric, isn't there? Obviously the A290 Alpine. That we've driven that is coming in at that point, and then the Abarth 500s, which I think we're driving the day after this is being recorded. And maybe they are a suitable or something that people will buy into because they're smaller cars and they are more occasional, but they've still got that daily usability case about them, haven't they? But have they just got that?
I don't know that they've got the spark though, have they? No pun intended with EVs, but hot hatches were always small and light and simple and chuckable and fun, and some of the more playful ones were a bit more of a handful. But hatchbacks were always a little bit unruly and sort of slightly park it on the naughty step kind of car, weren't they? Which I think there's a shift generally. It's harder to find that fun in any cars, but it's just not. They're not allowed to do the things hot hatches
they've become more
done,
sophisticated, haven't they, with more tech on them to make them more capable and usable for a wider audience. But that's then taken the spirit away of a hot hatch that
and the weight's twice as much, isn't it? Even if it's a small like Renault 5 or something, it's still twice the weight of a 106 Rally or something, isn't it? Literally, they can't have the freedom to be slung around because you'd fire it through a hedge.
All of those early French, particularly hot hatches, they all had lift off.
There's a strong chance you might go through a hedge backwards. Now you go through the hedge forwards because.
The shame!
French hot hatch if you actually understeered.
But there should be the opportunity to control the car with stability control. Let it have the agility, and then just
the dearly departed Fiesta ST. That was really they gave that a lot of leeway, didn't they? As soon as you showed it a corner, it was on three wheels and probably sideways,
which is great. And maybe they're just not trying hard enough. I don't know.
It might come. I'm sure it will come once they find their customer with the Alpine.
Well, I think they've got to find the market, haven't they? That's the biggest concern as a wider.
And that car really needs broad appeal for it to work and be a foundation for the brand to stick around and make it.
I think there's a big groundswell, isn't there, behind the Renault 5 and what Alpine are doing, and that small retro style hatch, and that can lead to a hot hatch could be. But they need to sort of find themselves, don't they, and go right. What?
So if you look back at hot hatches, what was the first hot hatch? And everybody said, it's Golf GTI Mark 1, but there was the Renault Alpine / Gordini 5, which came along the year before. So maybe the French are just going to do it again. They're just going to be there early on, get the market sorted.
And they did say on the launch of the A290, obviously all the journalists were asking, are you going to do a cup version or a trophy version? And they basically said, look, there is headroom there for it. Nothing yet, because they need to build the,
Well, it's easier to turn the performance up and down on an EV, so they do have the luxury of that.
They're showing the Renault 5.3e or E3, which is crazy the replica of the mid-engine
Turbo
2. So it does give, they can turn it up and down and have some fun, but that's €150,000.
Yeah, so that's a sort of special, random, crazy project.
So just to go back, you're saying Mark 1 Golf GTI was the original hot hatch?
No, I'm not saying that.
That's a can of worms.
Open that can of worms.
Okay, some people think it was the Mini Cooper.
Wasn't a hatch,
Alpha Sud, that wasn't a hatch to start with, but
it wasn't. But if you're going to go for the Mini, then you've got the Imp, the Imp Sport, with a little hatchback,
Sunbeam Stiletto.
That's it.
We've just lost 99% of our listeners now, apart from John Simister.
Matt Pryor. My mum had a Hillman Imp. Used to hold the rear window in with a bungee cord.
Yeah, I get if you accept that the Golf. It was the first GTI, wasn't it? Which is a good place to start the whole thing off, isn't it? But I saw a Mark 1 Golf on the motorway on Saturday. Holy moly, it's tiny. It looks like a little greenhouse. Like so angular, and literally half the size of the next smallest car you see on the road.
And there's like as much glass as body, isn't there?
Yeah. And that's why they were so light, because they were very small scale.
Yeah.
And it fitted between the lines of the road.
And parking spaces.
And parking spaces and garages. And
you get two in a parking space now.
That's the rest of the audience we've just lost talking about parking spaces. Yeah. There's been we've got today's hyper hatches, but there's always been dotted through, hasn't there, of manufacturers putting big engines in small cars or highly tuned engines in family sort of orientated hatchbacks.
Well, the Renault, the Clio V6, that's a mad car, isn't it? Does anybody know if the story's true that Volkswagen got wind of them making a 3-litre Clio and assumed that they meant 3 litres per 100 kilometres? And went off and did the Polo Blue Motion with all those aero tricks and the low rolling resistance.
It was the same time, wasn't it?
It was the same time. So that was the story.
Well, because you would sit there, wouldn't you? And go, well, it can't possibly mean that they're going to put a 3-litre V6 in a Renault Clio, so they must mean they're doing an efficiency.
Well, they obviously didn't look to Italy though, because it was the Alfa 147 GTA, which is a 3.2 litre front-wheel drive. I mean, a fabulous engine, great-looking car, but the two things don't necessarily go together.
Golf R32, same size engine, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Was that
but that was all-wheel drive though, wasn't it, rather than front-wheel drive?
But yeah, big engines in small cars,
which is kind of where hot hatch came from, because the original Golf GTI, small light car with a nice tasty engine.
Yeah, Sunbeam Lotus, I suppose that was a.
I mean, now I can remember everybody thought that was a crazy amount of horsepower. It was 150 horsepower.
That was the first hot hatch I ever went in, was Sunbeam Lotus, because a friend of mine's dad had one.
That's cool.
And he used to rally one. We had a road car and then rallied a rally car. I just remember being sat in the back with my mate and his dad driving inappropriate angles and speeds around roundabouts and things.
It was different back then, wasn't it?
I think it was.
Different times. Yeah, my mate Tim had one as well. But that was like less than 7 seconds to 60. It was so stonkingly quick.
Proper quick. It sounded really good.
I think that was your first hot hatch going, first one you went
I think probably the first one I would have been in, because it would have been a relatively new car then. So I was quite young.
What was yours? Hot hatch? I won't have to dig at your age, but you probably drove
Model T Ford Cup.
Thank you. When I joined Motor, I think the second or third issue, it was a snowy January, and both Autocar and Motor had the same car on the cover, which was the 205 GTI 1.9. And that was one of the first ones I went in.
It's a pretty good place to start.
Yeah, and it was great fun. Proper, raw, small, agile. And then Turbo Technics lent us one with turbo on it, which had 2-stage button. And I keep looking at them. They occasionally pop up on piston heads and places like that. And I think it was either 160 or 190 horsepower.
190? Holy crap.
And it might have been 175, actually. Might have been 175. But even so, it was... I mean, the standard car feels like it's, at the limit.
Yeah.
You had a load more turbo torque in. That was hilarious. I had a great weekend in that. Scaring other people, just leaving stuff for dead. So quick.
We tried to put 200 horsepower through a Mark IV Escort RS Turbo. That was as bad as it sounds.
Yeah, I bet that was torque steer-tastic, wasn't it?
It was absolutely appalling. Torque steer, the equivalent of front-wheel drive axle tramp.
Lots of lag, I should think.
It was just abysmal. And of course it was on coilovers and Betty was scraping the tarmac.
What magazine was that?
That might have been a modified Ford magazine. I think we then painted it in Repsol colours and also put an Escort Cosworth rear wing on it, obviously. That was truly appalling.
You had an XR2i, didn't you?
No, I had an RS 1800.
Oh, you did?
Mark III, which is awful. Absolutely.
It's probably worth about 70 grand now.
Probably,
if you were to auction
I remember driving
today.
it back from bought it from Well Lane Turbo. It was that or a Mark V RS 2000. So
I think you dodged a bullet there, didn't you?
No, the Escort was better than the Fiesta.
They did a front-wheel drive and a four-wheel drive in that Escort, didn't they? Weirdly.
But yeah, the Fiesta was abysmal. I don't think I got... So they were based up in Leeds. I don't think I got halfway home. And we stopped for fuel. My dad drove me up there on a Saturday, and I didn't have... He goes, what's it like? I didn't have the heart to say, it's fucking awful. And it was a...
And you an Essex boy as well, Stu.
I swapped it for an E3325i.
Oh, you did?
In a nightclub. With someone modified as well, because I was at max power at the time, so it had...
that would have made it better. It was really shoddy dynamically, wasn't it?
Yeah, that Mark III Fiesta was... The last thing it needed was more power, so Ford did the RS 1600i after the XR2i. And the turbo.
Turbo with the three spokes. The green line around the bumpers.
About, ruining it, fantastic old names. 1800i, jeepers.
Yeah, it was no...
Fiesta RS2 with a wheezy old engine in it.
But I'd had a collection of shit old fast forward. Mark III XR3i, Rosso red on some of the panels and another shade of red on the others. With those weird dogleg wheels, that was awful as well. 115 miles an hour, that would do.
What about you, James? Come on, bring us up to the 20th century. 21st century.
No, 20th would be a start, really.
Yeah, I mean,
yours was probably an RS3, wasn't it?
Except, I mean, I couldn't afford a hot hatch before I was a journalist, and then when I became a journalist, I definitely couldn't afford a hot hatch. So the first one I drove was a press car, and it was deeply disappointing circumstances because it was a Mark 6 Golf GTI, nothing wrong with that, but it was a cabrio, and it was in the snow, so it was maybe not the ideal sort of first.
Was that
hot
actually
hatch.
a Mark 6 though? Wasn't that just a
It was based on the Mark
rebodied?
5, wasn't it?
Yeah,
I think
it was a
think it was the
rebodied
Mark.
previous generation
Yeah.
thing, didn't they?
Was it even Mark 5? Didn't they?
Or maybe it's even the Mark 4.
Might have been
cabrio.
which was
Yeah.
Square-edged Clipper. They did
Yeah.
a Clipper, didn't they?
yeah, just
Yeah,
kept putting
Clipper.
different bumpers on it.
Yeah, but the first hot hatch I drove that really sort of blew my mind was the Renault Sport Megane Red Bull Racing Edition, which was a limited run one they did in 2013 to celebrate, because Renault were doing the Red Bull engines at the time and they'd won the Constructors' Championship.
That was Vettel era, wasn't it?
Yeah, so it was basically a 265 Cup in blue with some stickers.
Yeah.
But it was amazing. And it was the first car that really, because I'd been a bit of a hot hatch skeptic before that. I was quite narrow-minded. I was really only interested in cars with sort of 2 doors or 2 seats. I just liked sports cars and stuff. And it was the first time I realised a hot hatch could be as rewarding or even more fun to drive than a real, in inverted commas, sports car, because it was so fun. I could not stop driving it. I had it for a weekend, and I think I just spent the whole weekend driving everywhere. And first time I really felt the effect of a limited slip diff in a front wheel drive.
Yeah, they were really, because they would just pull you tighter into the corner, wouldn't they, if you kept your foot
it's
in.
like sort of hooking an umbrella around a lamppost.
Yeah,
it would sort of pull you around. It was that was a real kind of formative experience for me.
Been downhill since.
It's a pretty high watermark,
It is,
actually.
isn't it?
That's one of the best hatches I've ever driven, I think.
I ran quite a few of those Meganes, actually. I think I had 250.
continuously. I
tried to.
Yeah, we only found out you were running one when you'd sent some copy in. We go, oh, he's got another one. You did a 250, a 275, then a trophy. Was the black one the trophy with the adjustable Olins?
I had the Olins put on that, and then we tried it with the option, bigger wheels and inch smaller. I might have taken that to Super Chips as well. Sorry, Jeremy. So it did go up to about 305 horsepower at one point. That was such a good car.
Handle it?
Yeah. It was better on the smaller wheels, actually.
Okay.
But yeah, I love those cars, and they were everyone that hadn't been in one or didn't know modern Renaults would always go, "Oh, Renault, it's probably fallen apart." They were so well built, and never had any issues with any of them. And we would always take them to track days. I think Jethro was at Car then; he had one. I had one. We both went to a Renault Sport customer day at Spa and drove around Spa all day. They were so good. Really, really
they
well
were
built
weren't they?
cars.
Because the test cars we had, your long term, it would get thrown into every group test, track test.
No, I loved it.
Go on.
You hardly ever. I saw one on the road over the weekend, actually, going quite quickly. But you hardly ever see them now. I don't know where they've all.
True.
Don't know where they've all gone.
But when they at the Nürburgring car park, there'd be
it's
load of
Porsches,
911s.
BMWs,
And
and
Meganes.
Meganes, and maybe a few Hyundais actually.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah, the Hyundais kind of took over a bit from the Renault Sport stuff, didn't they? That crossover period. But you still have a hot hatch. Do we have to remind you that you have
the 106 Rally, yes, S2 Rally. I love that little car, but they're like from another age altogether.
Yeah.
Really, it's so light,
Absolutely.
no power steering, hairy in that respect, but quick and characterful, and all the things that I still want in a hot hatch. Actually, wind up windows. Maybe don't want one of those, but no, it's a cool little car.
John?
I've still got one.
You have Mark
one of
5
the
Golf
best.
GTI, haven't you?
Yeah, it's up to 162,500 miles now. Due a service next week. So, yeah.
Stick it on Dickie's bill.
Yeah, I'll just
Oh, yeah,
add
just
it and put it on my tab.
notice it.
Slip it in at the same time as the
Yeah.
others.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's going well. It's shown its age in some respects.
But that was a real return to form for
Yeah.
Volkswagen. I remember had
Yeah.
one. They're been out for about 18 months or so. But it was a high after the Mark III and the Mark IV.
Yeah.
Well, 4 was a stinker, wasn't it? So I think they, bit like they've had, they seem to drop the ball, don't they, VW? They get everything so right for so many generations of car, and then like with all the infotainment on the first
Oh, the Mark
Mark
8.
8s, and the way they drove actually wasn't great, and then they've kind of addressed that again, haven't they?
Yeah.
Remembered how to make a decent car.
Yeah, but that Mark V is...
Yeah, it's very good.
They're very good, aren't they? They just sort of... They do everything you expect them to do, but they can still sort of delight you with a little bit extra.
Yeah, there's so much on it that is just right. The seats in particular. Very rare that you get into any other car and think, wow, these are really fantastic seats, because I spend all my time in the Mark Vs. And it's a great combination of practicality and ride quality and handling is, it really does still tick a lot of boxes.
Well, I've had 2 appalling hot hatches. What's the worst one that you've driven, John?
Oh, there was... Dickie will know this. We...
I think I know what you're going to say. No.
I think I know what you're going to say now
we
as well.
were given as a long-term... I don't think we'd even asked for it. A car arrived, and even if the only thing left in the car park was this hot hatch and the van, which is a...
It didn't move, did it? It
Vauxhall
did not.
Vivano.
Yeah, it
we
didn't
would rather
move.
take the Vauxhall Vivano. And what was it, Dickie?
I'm guessing you mean the Toyota Corolla T-Sport. What was it, 180 T-Sport?
It was
Something?
180 T-Sport. And well, it was the same engine that they put into...
It's in the Celica, wasn't it?
Wasn't it?
But
Same
also, it was
engine.
the same engine that went into the Elise, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And they really, at Lotus, they really struggled to get the right gearing for it.
Okay.
Because obviously most of it was at the
It's
top
at
end.
the top end, yeah.
And, third gear would take you to about 140 miles an hour, so it wasn't really much.
Yeah, it was a bit like a
much
Cayman Boxster Cayman gearing, wasn't it? But in something that needed 1 million revs to actually do anything.
Yeah,
Well, we
probably
sent
the
it
worst.
back, didn't we?
Well, they offered it as... He said, do you want to keep it? We'll do a really good deal on it. And we went, nah, you're right. So they went and they finally collected it.
Slightly awkward, that, wasn't it?
It was. But here we are, GR Yaris.
Yeah.
You'd never guess.
Yeah.
Which is one of the best ever
Yeah.
hot hatches. So I don't know who was in charge of the development or marketing at the time, but they obviously weren't very...
I think they were trying to make something out of it that it wasn't, weren't they, actually?
But that was peak. Oh, people are buying hot hatches. We need to have one. What have
Everybody
we got?
needs one, yeah.
Well, there was a weird period, wasn't there, when we were at Performance Car with the 5-cylinder Fiat
Oh, Bravo.
Bravo and
Brava, Brevia.
VW Group had just brought the 1.8T engine out, so that seemed like...
That went everything.
Yeah,
over
so...
there, didn't it?
But that wasn't actually a great
No.
engine.
No, it wasn't. I mean, it was 5 valves per cylinder. But it sounded so bland, didn't it?
Yeah.
1.8T. They only corrected that when they brought out the Mark 5 Golf. And that
The
was
engine.
2 litre, and it was
Yeah.
much more characterful. But yeah, that was pretty awful.
Come on, Dickie. What's the worst one you drove?
Oh, God, I know you're going to say this. We've covered a lot of them, haven't we? There's been an awful lot of Duff Fords.
Cicento Sporting, the Fiat.
Yeah, I quite like that, but it's not. It had a 6-speed gear. No, that was the Punto 6-speed,
Punto,
wasn't
did
it?
it have 7 or 6?
6.
Didn't they chase after moped riders for your first hot hatch?
don't
And it was
know,
a
yeah, the
7-speed
Cicento.
manual, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah,
Maybe
but the
they-
Cicento wasn't
No, that wasn't.
That
That
was-
was
not great. Sort of oddball ones. What did we mention? The Proton
Satria.
Satria that Lotus did the chassis and
Yeah.
stuff. That was quite a good car actually,
Yeah.
but one of those things that kind of appeared and then was never
We
followed
had
up
that
by
on that
anything else.
massive test at Anglesey.
Yeah.
We did.
99, I think it was.
Yeah, we
Had
had
the Civic Jordan.
with a slight
Yeah.
toe-in issues after Roger
Yeah.
Yeah.
bounced it off something.
But yeah, as you say, they came and no one really picked up on it and it disappeared.
I don't know
again,
who
didn't
decided they needed to do it, and they did it pretty well. And then,
I think it's 'cause
then
I'm-
they never followed it up with it. Maybe they realised that they owned Lotus, they'd forgotten all about it, and then
Yeah.
did that car. Because John Miles did that car. I remember him being on the
Really?
launch.
it? Might have had something to do with Proton only Lotus and
Yeah.
going, right, we've got a workforce here building nothing at the moment. Can we
Yeah,
give them
let's-
some work?
Give them a job.
What's on your underrated list then?
My underrated list was the Fiat Tipo 16 valve.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sedici Valvole,
Oh,
I think
yeah.
you mean, John.
Yeah, I think so. That is what I meant, but I
Never
can't
driven
say
one
it.
of those, but I do remember everyone raving about them at the time.
It sort of drove a little bit like it looked, because it looked very bottom heavy.
Yeah, it's broad,
Yeah.
wasn't it?
Yeah.
Quite wide track.
But it was one of those cars that the damping was just spot on. Magnus at Hyperion.
Yeah, whenever anyone mentions that, I always think of Magnus because he's the only person I know that ever owned one.
With the H sticker on the back.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember that. Daihatsu Charade GTTI.
I was waiting for you to mention that.
I mean, that was a jewel of an engine. I remember some journalists came back from the launch going, "Cool, it's a great engine, but whoa, so much lift off oversteer." Yeah, that was a lively car. So that was a good one.
Was it 100 horsepower? 660 cc's or something, wasn't it?
99 horsepower, 1 litre, 12 valve turbo.
Yeah.
That's fantastic, isn't it? So I had the choice of that when I was at Autocar and Motor, that or an AXGT. And I took the AXGT, and I kind of wish I'd taken the Daihatsu.
That's quite a nice choice to have, though.
Yeah.
It was. It
First
was.
world problems.
And the Swift GTI, that
Swiss
mentioned
Sport.
that before. But yeah, they were pretty good as well.
The first ones were really good, weren't they?
Yeah.
Same with the Ignis. That was a
Yes,
Suzuki
yeah.
Ignis was a weird looking thing, but they rallied them a lot of the time. Didn't
That's
they?
right, yeah.
So yeah, we mentioned Vauxhall before, but Vauxhall seem to have the great engines and a bit flat-footed
Yeah.
chassis.
Yeah, their engines were always
Better.
better than anything that Ford was knocking out at the
Yeah.
time.
But yeah.
So who shouldn't have bothered making a hot hatch? Because there's been some we're glad to do today, but they shouldn't have bothered with that Corolla. But is there any manufacturers who've sort of that we think have done it and really they shouldn't have done and they've
I
carried on
think
for
the,
too much?
the current Vauxhall Astra GSE is a waste of everyone's time, isn't it?
Yeah, but it just seems that's just a badge thing of
Yeah,
bringing back
that's
the
right.
GSE.
It's
It's
kind of
across
sad though,
everything
isn't it?
now, isn't it? Grandland
Yeah.
and whatever else they make. Mockers, I think you can get Mocker version, but yeah, that's more of a proper badge trim
Yeah.
line than a
Yeah.
really proper hot hatch or even a warm. As we know last year, it's just not a warm hatch at all, is it?
Everybody's had a high spot, haven't they? Skoda with the VRS.
Yeah.
Fabia, that was
Yeah.
a lovely little car. You
That
still
was turbo supercharged, wasn't it? The Fabia.
Yes, it was, wasn't it? Is it 1.4?
Don't ask me
1.4.
stuff like that. Yes, I think it was.
No, most people have had a decent go at it, I think. You know, the older cars, like we said, they're lighter, so you don't need much go to make them fun. They're always going to be more agile than anything that's being made today, all these electric cars that are getting on for 2 tons.
More than that, sadly. Who should build one? Who would you like to build a hot hatch? Who would?
Well, I think anybody who can make a decent car. I think Porsche, they've never made a hot hatch, have they?
Yeah.
Unless you can.
Pagani, I don't know.
Pagani. Aston Martin when they stuck a V8 in a Signet,
Yeah, I drove
which is
that.
just sold, hasn't it?
Hasn't it?
Yeah, it's up,
Yeah.
it's up for sale,
It's up for-
certainly.
I mean, that was a case of, yes, they could, but should they have done that?
Yeah.
Because it was a V8 Vantage chassis, wasn't it? Shortened.
Yeah, I think that was it was like, could it
be done?
could it fit? And then someone was mucking around in CAD. It's like, well, actually, it could. So they did it for a particular customer that had bought quite a lot of other stuff. So it was a great
It's one of those disconnects between the sound of the car and what it looks
Yeah.
like.
and the fact it's front
disconnect.
engine, not rear engine, is quite a feat, isn't it?
It's like the V8 Mini we drove last year, the Vinny. That
Yeah,
was,
yeah,
like
that's
the sound it made versus
Yeah,
what the car was.
that's an awesome car.
Yeah, it's great.
Is it,
Really
talking
cool.
of minis, that generation, BMW haven't really built. It's going to get lots of hate now, but the 135i's and the 140s.
Yeah,
I've never.
Some brands
there's never been there, have they?
never
I suppose
exist
they've
in
got
your head
Mini.
in that space,
Yeah,
do they?
They've
I
got
don't-
minis that have always, obviously, within the group, and whether they always hold the 1 Series back, but they've never really sort of flown, have they? Haven't.
No,
I
it's
quite
true.
like the rear-wheel drive ones,
Yeah.
but I've never got on with the current M135.
No, things with the rear-wheel drive, as you discovered, blowing 2 up in the space of 2 weeks. That was the
One at Anglesey and one at Rockingham.
yeah M13. That was the 135, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Quite considerable oil surge.
Locked solid. Well, so solid that they couldn't get it off the track at Anglesey.
Wow.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, just a clonk. That was it. Guys. They had a track day that night, I think.
Oh, no, really?
Motorbikes coming in that
Trying
night. We couldn't
Oh,
get it off.
God.
They had to drag it off with a tractor, I think. Just these sort of lines where it was.
Oh, how embarrassing.
Yeah, it's a bit awkward.
Obviously, Dickie did the honourable thing and just, I've got to go now.
See ya.
Bye. Okay, so one hot hatch then. You can only drive one more hot hatch. What's it going to be? I haven't asked you to prepare for this. So
Megane R26R.
Ooh.
I remember that got delivered to me for Car of the Year. I didn't know anything about it. And I came out on the back window. I thought, well, and the stripes. It wanted to be an RS Porsche. I thought, this is a bit. And then I got into Wales, and instead of going straight to the hotel, I just went down roads I've not been down before.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I was having so much fun.
Yeah.
And that's
It's
one of
an
the few cars
amazing
I can
car.
still remember driving a particular stretch of road in that car and how it felt.
Right.
Because it
Yeah.
was so.
Well, they had
so
softer
good.
springs, didn't they? Because they compensated for the weight saving, so it actually felt more supple,
Yeah.
even though it had like 888R Toyo
They were
tyres,
noisy, weren't they?
Yeah.
Very
but
noisy.
it always seemed to work well in the wet, and it worked on bumpy roads really well. That's a really cool car.
What's yours going to be?
Oh God, I have very fond memories of Cleo Williams because that's the first proper launch I ever went on, and whenever I drive one, they're really good. Like, you think, like, can't still be that good, because you think it's quite an old car now, but it's still just almost peak Renault. I don't know, because I grew up, mum and dad had a Williams, and before that they had a Renault 5 GT Turbo, so the Raider went all blue. Two very different cars, but I'm very fond of either of those. I think it might be a 5 GT Turbo, actually, because it's a really quick little car.
Yeah.
It's got a really sort of meaty gear shift. Just remember certain cars, you remember all the all that weird, brittle, sort of funny dashboard and stuff, but they went like stink. And tiny little thing.
Yeah.
So I think it would probably be that, actually.
It's just reminded me of perhaps the hot hatch that shouldn't have been made. Do you remember the Visa GTI?
Oh, Nick Trott's going to hate you for saying about Visa GTI. He loves Visas.
They're terrible, aren't they? What an awful car. I mean, it's amazing there's still any on the road. I've never driven one, but I remember Russell Bulging, God bless him, describing the engine sounded like 1,000 sewing machines going at once, because they did a middle pieced one as well.
Didn't
they?
They? That's the one Nick's got the hots for.
Yeah.
Come on, James. What about you?
Well, before we sat down, I made a little short list of the best hot hatches I've driven, or my favourite ones I've driven. I thought the Golf GTO Club Sport S, the 2-seat one, that's pretty incredible.
Yeah, that's a 2016 car the year that was on, wasn't it? Finished on the podium.
It's a pretty epic
with
thing.
the 911R and the 570.
Yeah.
So it was,
R26R is on there, but I loved the Trophy R that came after it as well. That was it's years since I've driven one, but I remember being so excited by that, so I'd love to have another drive in that. When I was a student, I had a really Bogo Peugeot 306, the most basic model they ever made. It didn't even have a rev counter, it had a clock instead. But I really wanted to drive a 306 Rally or a GTI 6, so I'd love to drive one just to know what it feels like.
Yeah. I had a 306 Rally, mega.
Yeah.
And then parked on my parents' drive for 9 months while I drove around in a company car. And because I wasn't living at home, I forgot I had a 306 Rally.
Right.
And you used to get reminders. Your car's still here. Your car. Oh yes.
Did you come back and the tyres were all flat and it was kind of?
I'd go back. I must take that out for a drive. And we would do. And then they think, oh, brilliant, he's taken his car. And then I'd come back and go, yep, that's all been warmed through. Everything's running. It's MOT'd. I've had it serviced. See you in a year.
Yeah, you'd
they are mega 306 Rallies.
That's on my list.
Yeah, so I'll go for that.
Good choice.
Very much.
Civic Type I's of the last two generations.
Yeah, both those.
Yeah,
they're on my short list.
I was a bit worried we were going to get to the end of this podcast and not mention a car that every time we drive one, think, oh, if Porsche made a hot hatch, it would be a Civic Type R.
It does feel like it. It's like the 911 GT3 of hot hatches, isn't it?
The attention to detail.
Yeah, and it was a previous gen. They did one without the rear wing for about 3 weeks, didn't they? Because we got one in, did the review.
Sportline. Civic Sportline.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's right, yeah.
Readers got in touch with their dealer saying, I want one of these. Like, what are you talking about? It doesn't exist.
Yeah.
And it had been brought into the UK, decided they weren't going to sell it before they'd even put it on configurators or sold it on. But that is not only super rare, and it was grey, the press car.
Yeah.
Like Spec
really
D Impreza, wasn't it?
Basically,
they did a Spec D, sort of D-winged STI.
Yeah. So I'd either had that or a 306 Rally, so I can drive it as I should have done. I owned one, but I just forgot about it.
To make amends.
Yeah. Make amends for not actually driving one of the greatest hot hatches.
Yeah, that or the GTI 6.
Yeah.
Very, very good cars.
Well, I just like the idea of winding down windows, no power steering. And it was proper, the seats were just, we need to put some seats in a car. And
they're quite squidgy, weren't they? They're a bit like Claire Williams seats.
Yeah.
They just sort of sink into them.
Very French.
They look like they feel like they're cut from one piece of foam, don't they?
Yeah.
The one I had, they were like that, but the driver's seat, all the cushioning sort of collapsed, so it kind of like supported me where I didn't need support, and then kind of, so it was like driving an old armchair or something.
The later Clio 200s as well, they were.
Yeah, 200 Cup.
Yeah.
I mean,
well, there was that sweet spot, wasn't there, where there was just so many.
Every single one. I think we've taken them for granted, haven't we? I think fundamentally, you just keep thinking there's an endless conveyor belt of these really great cars, and then there aren't any more coming now.
Fiesta STs and I see on is that 208 GTI or is that your 205? Because the 208 was
they never did it for me. But no, 205.
It got better when they did the engineered by Peugeot Sport version later.
Yeah.
Because I think it was really
Is that the
disappointing.
weird split
the
colour
Coupe
scheme?
Franche, they called it. Yeah.
What did they call it?
Coupe Franche. I'm probably horribly mispronouncing that. There'll be
What did
some-
they call it?
Sound like Del
Or
Boy.
something from-
The Cal Fromage Rodney.
I had to look up what it meant. It's a style of hairdressing. It's like female hairdressing, whether it's a very straight line,
Oh,
the haircut.
Get you?
What do you?
Gervais.
It's only because I had to write about it, so I had to work out what it meant. But
Stu, put it on expenses. We'll see what it looks like next month.
What, his haircut?
Yeah.
Oh,
It's
okay.
a bit longer
I was
first.
buying the 208 GTI. Yeah, they were good. The 308 GTI was the last one of those.
the annoying thing about that car, when you put it in sport mode, it turned the whole rev counter red, so you didn't know where the red line was. And in the mode, you probably
Well, you couldn't see anything anyway because the steering wheel's in the way, isn't it?
True.
Yeah, I think we've probably come to an end of here, which is going to really annoy Miguel, who's sat here filming us, because it means we've run out of time to talk about the Corsa VXR Nürburgring edition.
Next time.
Next time, there'll be a whole podcast about it.
Absolutely.
Devoted to the Drexler differential.
Yes,
and the,
just
yeah.
yeah. One on the diff, one on the paintwork.
Yeah.
So yeah, we'll bring this one to a close. Thank you very much, John.
Thanks, Stu.
James.
Thank you.
Dickie.
Thank you.
Yes, if you want to see Dickie's 964 RS at a track day, our track days will be announced by the time this comes out. So go on to evo.co.uk and you will see where we're going to be this year. Hopefully you see you there at some point.
Cool.
Thank you.
Thank you. Cheers, everyone.
Thanks.